Hello and welcome to the More Confidence with Luna Gaia podcast. I am your host, Luna Gaia, and here we talk all things body image, self-esteem, self-love, and how to return to a place where you get to truly love the skin that you're in, not just on the outside, but to reconnect with your soul and your heart so that you can feel whole once again. On today's episode, we have the wondrous Kat Fox here. She's a certified master level coach specializing in body image work using an intuitive eating and spiritual approach, which I adore. She helps women find true, genuine body peace so that they can live their life liberated in their bodies and own their greatness. With her experience in transformational coaching, she's able to guide her clients through old belief systems and reprogram those beliefs so that they can step into the most empowered version of themselves. She is always guiding her clients back to themselves, helping them tap into their own intuition and make self-guided decisions throughout their journey back home into their bodies. It is from this place that they can feel into their sense of worth and create the life they most desire to live. It is such a pleasure to have Kat here. What I love so much about Kat's journey is that she had a huge experience of disordered eating, had an eating disorder, hated her body for a long time, and came to a point in her life where after having children, maybe after feeding child and breast changing, had this moment of, I guess, this aha moment, this moment of clarity. Kat, tell me more. What happened? Tell us a bit about your story, about your history with eating disorders, and then what happened when you had your child and everything kind of fell on top of you.
Yeah, first of all, thank you for that beautiful introduction. It was so warming for me.
Thank you for being here.
So yeah, thank you for having me. As far as my disordered relationship with food and body goes, it was essentially my whole life. I didn't know anything aside from the disordered relationship. I was never taught how to have a healthy relationship with food. I was never taught how to see my body as good and enough and worthy. I was always taught to just fear food and hate body.
Yeah.
That's really the only thing that I knew. My first memory of deciding that my job as a woman was to be physically and energetically small, I was 5 years old.
Oh, who feels that? Oh,
yeah. And the thing is, I had mentioned earlier, because we were talking earlier, but I'm a small human. I'm a naturally small human. That shouldn't be something that I was concerning myself with at that age.
Yeah.
But because I was attending all of the Weight Watchers meetings with my grandmother and my mother, it became very, very clear to me that, as a female, it's my job to make sure that I weigh in at a certain weight, that I don't gain weight. I don't go over this, whatever number they want me to not go over.
Yep.
And I had no idea what that was for anybody, but I knew that you weren't supposed to gain weight.
Yes.
And as a 5-year-old, I knew that these women in my life and attending every single meeting was, don't eat anything outside of X, Y, and Z.
Yeah.
And make sure you're weighing out all of your portions. And you're only allowed to have a brownie or a cookie or a muffin if you have extra points from the day before.
Yeah.
Or if you have reserved calories from the day before, right?
Yeah.
And so that was naturally something that I really just kind of took on for myself. And then as I got older, through elementary school especially, all of the girls would gather on the playground in a circle and we would compare our bodies. Who's gotten bigger over the last year, who has less fat on their bodies, who still has the baby fat that we're just supposed to magically lose all of a sudden by the time we're in like first grade, whatever. Right. So we're already comparing our bodies so young. And of course, the older I get, I start to notice that my body is changing because, 10 to 12 years old is when we go through those really big transitions from little girlhood to adolescence. We are entering into young adult women, and our bodies are going to change but nobody told me that it would require me to gain weight.
Yeah,
and that I would get curves in weird places.
Put on weight. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. That this natural occurrence is going to happen and you're going to curve weird. And nobody mentioned it.
Yes.
And so
and couple that with fear food, hate body,
mm-hmm.
and the fact that putting on any amount of weight is bad, naturally, as a growing child, adolescent, you're going to feel wrong, right?
Yeah. And so like already by 4th grade, I'm weighing myself every day.
And what's 4th grade? How old are you in 4th grade for all of us that
yes. Schools are different across the world.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
4th grade for me, I was probably 10 years old.
Okay, yeah, cool. Yep.
Thank you. Yep. So already by that time I'm scared to eat things that aren't deemed healthy.
Yeah.
I'm skipping a lot of meals. I'm not really allowing myself snacks, especially like with the after school program. It was kind of weird to be like, oh, I'm not hungry because all the other kids were eating. And so I would just kind of sit there silently and wait to be dismissed. And eventually I would say it turned into full-fledged eating disorder when I was probably about 15 is when people finally started getting concerned, because even though I had gotten my menstrual cycle at like 12, 13 years old, it was never regular.
Yeah, right.
And that was kind of a red flag.
Yeah.
But what became the red flag was when I wasn't gaining weight and I wasn't growing anymore.
Yes. Yeah.
So that's when, I started seeing nutritionists, and I was taken to a whole new doctor, and I was able to say, well, I'm fine. I wasn't ready to admit that there was a problem.
Well, there wasn't one, Kat. The reality is that psychologically, there wasn't a problem because you were doing all the things that you were raised to do, which was to fear being fat, fear putting on weight, fear growing bigger, and watching what you ate, which is all that you were doing. You were just doing what you were modeled to do. It's just that you were a child and didn't need to lose any weight. That was the thing, but that part wasn't educated as part of your upbringing.
Yeah. I think the really big thing too was I never fit in.
Yeah.
I've always been a very, unique individual, which I totally own now. I'm different than anybody else, and I'm totally okay with that. That's something I really have learned to embrace. But as a child, you just want to fit in.
Yeah.
And so I thought that if I could just be thin enough, then the girls would be my friends and the boys would like me.
Yeah.
And that's not, while I did have confirmation that boys liked me, specifically through promiscuity in my teen years, and accolades from girls on, oh, you're so thin. How do you manage to stay so thin? It was never enough because, I'm still looking in the mirror at night in tears, wishing I could cut off all these parts that I just hate about myself, like the way my hips curve, which is nothing. It doesn't matter how little I eat and how much I work out. My hips curve the way they do.
It's a bone.
That's my genetics.
Yeah, and it's a bone of your body, right? Like you can't.
Yeah.
You can't shape that.
Exactly. And we're just not taught that there's body diversity. That was something that we have to learn on our own, unfortunately. And the more that we do this work as adults, we can set the next generation up. It's really legacy work.
Yeah.
But I would say my turning point was well into motherhood. It wasn't even like it was years after I had my son.
Yep.
He was a C-section baby, and I was a high risk pregnancy. And there was some concern because I wasn't gaining any weight after 36 weeks. It's like I was gaining kind of steadily. And then at 36, he stopped growing and I stopped growing.
Yeah, right.
And I was really made to feel like that was my fault.
Yeah.
But
by that point, Kat, were you eating like that? Sort of, we've jumped a bit from 15. I know you mentioned you had him young. So were you eating at that point? Were you still in the kind of midst of the disorder, do you think?
I was most certainly in the midst of the disorder.
Yeah.
I was, to be clear, I was 18 when I got pregnant.
Okay,
I graduated school early.
Yeah.
So I did manage to finish school. I got my high school degree before I got pregnant, which is really more than I guess any of my family could have asked of me. Teen years were very messy internally. And the only control that I had was with food. And so at 18, this was still there. I was also sick through the whole pregnancy. So it was very hard for me to keep anything down, even if I did want to eat. Really, the only thing that I could keep down was nuggets and fries because they were so bland. They didn't make me sick.
Yeah. And the salty factor. No, for me, when I was super sick through pregnancy, it was salty food that was really, it helped me. Yeah.
That salt calmed everything down. Every single time.
So you're 36 weeks pregnant. You've stopped growing. He's stopped growing, and you're being shamed around it. So just another addition to your body is wrong and you are wrong. What then?
Yeah. So they put me on bed rest. They're like, oh well, we want to make sure that you're not exerting yourself too much, and both our heart rates were going up. Okay. So there was some stress testing done and all of that not so fun stuff. It was really quite miserable. It really was. And it was kind of one of those things where like I wanted to eat because I was hungry. And yet at the same time, I was so stressed that I just couldn't eat. And so when I was able to kind of force feed myself, it wouldn't stay down anyways. And I made it to full term. They had, long story short, they had tried to induce me. And that put my child's little body into a panic. And they had to go straight into an emergency C-section. So they, with the C-section, you're in the hospital a lot longer. And it wasn't until 3 days in that hospital bed that the nurses team came up and said, it's time to get up. It's time to take a shower. It's time to, start reacclimating into the world again. And I tried so hard not to look in the mirror. Like that was the one thing that I just wanted to avoid. But the bathroom had a whole wall just full of mirror. Why they would do this to women, I don't know. But in my peripherals, I see this body that I just don't recognize anymore. And I thought I had body image issues before, and I knew I did. I'd been struggling with anorexia for years. I knew, and I was not prepared for this level. It was a whole new level of body image and dysmorphia that I was not prepared for, and that nobody told me would impact me the way it did. And I just felt myself break.
Particularly when we have that adage, and I remember having a very similar experience, and still me, I'm 5 months postpartum. So it's very fresh for me in that reality in terms of my body. And I put on a significant amount of weight during my pregnancy. And so carrying that, I still have the belly, and it's 5 months later. And I even remember immediately afterwards just being like, there's this, I didn't even notice it, Kat, and I've been working on this for a long time, and my body image and self-esteem and self-love is solid at this point in my life. And yet having that experience of, the world has told me, get your body, your post-body baby. What am I trying to say? You know what I mean? Like,
get your body back, essentially.
Get your body back. And Kim Kardashian did it in 6 weeks, or so-and-so did it in, in a really short period of time. And I didn't realize how much of that messaging had gotten to me until the similar moment for you. Like, I'm standing there in front of the mirror, and maybe straight away I was like, oh, well, like, it happens. But a week later, 3 weeks later, 5 weeks later, I'm like, why hasn't it gone away yet? Like, why has my body still looked so different? And I've really had to use all of my tools to be able to be okay with me. And, you know, I'm 7 kilos. I don't know what that is in pounds, but I'm still 7 kilos heavier than I was pre-pregnancy. Now I put on 20. So that, you know, but there's still this idea that I need to be smaller. There's still, I still need to not battle it. It's not the word that I use. I still need to recognize that there's programming that's happened that tells me that after having a baby, your body's meant to look a certain way.
Oh, yeah. And that we're just going to bounce back right away.
Yeah. And particularly after cesarean, right? Like, you've just had major abdominal surgery. You can't do much.
Exactly. And I can't, you know, I wasn't allowed to drive for 3 months. I wasn't fully healed for 3 months either. And it was one of the hardest moments of my life, because like I chose to breastfeed my child. I wanted to do that, and I had more than enough milk production to be able to do so.
Right. Yeah.
But I also knew that I wasn't going to keep producing milk if I didn't eat.
Yeah.
So it was like almost this process of healing, but not really healing. I ate to feed my child.
Yeah.
The second he was no longer nursing, which was after about 2 years, I immediately fell back into my old patterns again.
Yeah, right. So
I wasn't.
You just put it on hold.
Yeah, I just put it on hold, and it's like, you know, I was certainly over exercising during the process of nursing as well. And that was like the only way I knew how to control what was happening. There was still a lot of food restriction. Let's be honest. I didn't allow myself any of the Christmas sweets. I wasn't allowed to have any candy ever, no desserts. It was a very strict meal plan that I had placed myself on. And then when he had turned 2, it just, you know, I immediately fell back into everything again. I stopped eating again. I was exercising probably about 3 hours a day. Wow. Totally exhausted. I didn't get I'm going to call it a semi-regular period, because it wasn't non-existent. It would say hello every once in a while.
That's why,
it was not regular.
Yeah.
And so my period really did not come back well until actually it was 2020 when I started having a consistent period again.
Yeah, right.
Because I had just damaged and abused and neglected my body for so many years.
Yeah.
It took a long time to get that piece back. But when you're nursing, about 6 months in, you get your menstrual cycle back again. Sometimes it's sooner because we have different bodies.
And sometimes
it's later.
Yeah, some people don't get it the whole time they're nursing.
Yeah, exactly. And for me, it was about between 6 and 8 months, but it became a lot more infrequent.
Yeah,
when he turned 2.
Yeah.
Because everything I had gone into my control freak frenzy with food and exercise again. And he was 5 years old when I was getting ready in the morning, and he had come up to me. So we're fast forwarding a little bit. I had been struggling. Also, I should actually rewind a little bit too. So when he was 3, I was officially clinically diagnosed with my eating disorder. And that was because I had collapsed at work.
Yeah, right.
And so all of a sudden, you know, my body just can't take the beating anymore.
Yeah.
And I was forced to start making some improvement. Well, I started eating again, but I was still over exercising and still restricting a lot too. So like, it was the bare minimum that I was willing to do. That was even with all of the hair loss, even with the lack of energy, even with the avoiding of family photos, and, you know, not taking my son to the pool because I didn't want my body to be seen by other people. And I didn't want to be judged and shamed the way I was judging and shaming myself at home. I still didn't think anything was wrong until one moment.
And again, it's that thing that that's the narrative that's acceptable. It's socially, so really what we're doing, the socially acceptable narrative is that of an eating disorder. It's socially acceptable to shame your body, to restrict food, and to hate yourself. That's the narrative. So then when people go, quote, extreme on that, it's like, oh, you have an eating disorder. No, honey, everybody has a freaking eating disorder. Like,
if you're on a diet, it's disordered eating.
It's disordered eating. Correct. Correct. Yeah.
And, you know, the thing is, we have three major things that influence our body image and our relationship with food. That's family, peers, and the media.
Yeah.
Now, I was also a huge pop culture junkie because I didn't have a lot of friends. So I was surrounded with music and art and TV and film and magazines. And so I became obsessed with not only the trends, but what used to be. Right. And so like I watched a lot of Saved by the Bell because I loved the 80s, even though I'm a 90s kid. Yeah. I loved learning about the trends before me and upcoming trends. And it was pop culture junkie. Yeah. And that really fed into my justification over what I was doing to myself. Yeah. Because I thought that that's just what I'm supposed to do. Yeah. Yeah. It absolutely is socially acceptable. But yet, like you said, when you go on the extreme end of it, people are like, oh, but wait a minute, this is too far.
And it's your fault then. So the narrative that gets spewed out of us in media and everywhere is that you need to control your food, you need to restrict, you need to exercise more and eat less. That is the narrative 100% in order to be healthy. But if you take that too far, it's, oh my God, I get so pissed off about this, Kat. It's always our fault. It's always our fault. If I fail on the diet, I fail the diet. If you you get an eating disorder, you failed. Every single rail on the line, it is our fault. If we take it to extreme, then we just didn't know how to handle ourselves. Or if I then break my diet because I can't restrict that much and then end up binging and then purging, my fault. It's And I appreciate personal responsibility. And of course, as a coach, you teach the same thing.
Oh, yeah. Personal responsibility is important. Yet at the same time, we also have to accept that this is the culture we're raised in.
100%.
Across the world, clearly. I mean, this is nothing new for anybody.
No.
One thing that really kind of pisses me off, though, is you don't get diagnosed with an eating disorder unless your body actually changes the way mine did. I had friends who had eating disorders for years and never got diagnosed because they lived in bigger bodies. Yep. And yet they were starving themselves. They just are naturally supposed to be in a bigger body, which doesn't mean anything about them. And yet they were still told, oh, just keep doing what you're doing because it's working.
Yeah, it's actually not working. It's okay to starve yourself until you're anorexic, in which case it's not okay to starve yourself. You should really eat something. Hang on, you've been telling me my whole damn life. And you're 100% right. I think Tess Holliday, if you're familiar with her, she's an American plus size supermodel. She's just recently come out and told the world that she has an eating disorder, and people like anorexia, and people are like, but you're fat. You can't.
It doesn't matter.
And she's like, you know what? You can have anorexia, and because it's a mental disease. It's not.
It is. You know, eating disorders and mental illnesses and disease does not discriminate on body.
It really does not.
And it does look very different from body to body. Yeah. So my best friend lived in a bigger body and she was doing the same shit I was and still never got diagnosed. Yeah. And at some point she was certainly more severe than I was as well. For me, I happen to have a body that changes when I starve myself. Yeah. And that's also somewhat of a privilege because that allowed the medical community that I was surrounded by to say, this needs to stop.
Stop. Yes. Yeah.
And I was able to get some level of help, but what really changed it for me was when my son started calling himself fat in the mirror. At 5 years old, when I started taking everything in. Yes. And that was my big wake-up call. Yeah. And I'm like, I can't let this happen.
No.
He's 5. And also, he's always been slightly underweight for his age.
Yeah.
He's always fallen below that line
Yeah.
on the doctor's charts. And so it just baffled me that this
Yeah.
was even a thing. And my partner has also said too that that's how he knew things were getting bad with me again.
Yeah, when your son started.
When he noticed my son taking on the same behaviors,
Mm.
he then realized that I was struggling again.
Yeah.
But the thing is, I never actually started healing.
Yeah.
I just masked it.
Yeah.
Right. And so that was the week that I really started to commit.
Yeah.
I threw out my scale. That was the first thing that I did.
Yes.
I also threw out all of the clothes that didn't fit, that were too small.
Yep.
And just got rid of them.
Mm-hmm.
But what I didn't do yet was stop dieting.
Yeah. And it's a process, right? And I want people listening here at home that, I stopped weighing myself too. Like there's just a number on a scale. Imagine people didn't know in the same kind of way that you said before. There used to be a time where people didn't know how much they weighed.
And it didn't even matter. It was never taken into account. It never determined whether or not you were healthy or whether or not you were enough or if you were good. And now it's one of those things where that's what everybody wants to focus on. They want to focus on their age. They want to focus on their weight. They want to focus on how much money they make because that determines what class they're in within our society. And all of these numbers are really just holding us back from our inner magic and preventing us from being able to step into that power and live a life that we truly deserve and want, really, ultimately. And so one thing that I think is really, really powerful, all of my clocks in my house are dead. They don't work, first of all.
Nice.
So if I need to show up to a meeting, like today, for instance, I just set that little alarm clock on my phone. It goes off and I'm like, okay, it's time for me to do this thing. But I'm not constantly checking the time. And then with the scale, the number one thing I tell everybody to do, throw out the scale.
Yes.
Because what is it going to do for you?
Yeah. What is knowing that number? Like, what does that do? I know that I had that experience as I moved further and further away from diet culture. It was similar for me too. I got to the point where my trainer decided that he wanted to weigh everybody in every week. And I was like, I don't want to know. And he goes, well, I'm just going to know so we can track it. So I would get on the scale and I would not pay attention. He would write it down and I would ignore it. And then after maybe a month, I just said to him, I said, I don't even want you to know. It's just not important to me. It's not important to me. If I'm paying you, it shouldn't be important to you either. I don't understand how this number, because now I'm thinking about it. Well, did I put on weight this week? Have I lost weight this week? What's my body fat this week?
Yes.
What does it matter? Well, like I was training 6 hours a week, getting stronger, really enjoying the activity. What did it matter whether or not my body mass went up or down?
Yes, I actually had a very similar experience, and it was one of my first times really standing up for myself when it came to my body autonomy, right? And knowing that I was in this certain place within my recovery and healing journey. So I walk in and I'm working with a personal trainer for the first time in my life. And they want to break down all of my macronutrients and tell me what to eat and give me a food plan. And then they were like, okay, are you ready to step on the scale? And I'm like, actually, I'm going to stop you because I'm not going to follow your meal plan. First of all, I'm not interested in your meal plan. I'm not interested in your macronutrients. I have that information already. And I'm not going to step on that scale.
Yeah.
Because quite frankly, that doesn't tell you anything about my health.
Yep.
What tells me about my health is, am I feeling energized from this movement that I am doing with my body right now?
Beautiful.
And that's it.
Yeah.
And they were really thrown off. They were like, well, are you sure? And I'm like, can you just show me a new exercise, please?
Yes. It's since when did movement, and I know we obviously know why, it's a $1 billion industry, but movement to be connected with weight, it's like it doesn't make any sense. I saw a beautiful meme the other day, and it's a bit crass, so bear with me. It said it was like, trainer, so what's your goals for joining the gym? Me, to be able to ride that D for the next 30 minutes. Like, I was like, now that's a goal. Like, that's a goal.
Oh
I want to be able to go hard on that D for a solid half an hour, 45 minutes.
Yes.
Like, now that's a reasonable goal. Like, it's like, I don't care about how much I lose. I want to be fit enough to do the things that I want to do in life. And that happened to be one of the ones that she wanted to do in her life.
Well, and I absolutely love that goal because that tells us what area we need to focus for muscle improvement, right? And so let's strengthen those thigh muscles and let's maybe work on the core a little bit and build up that muscle. I think that can tell you so much more about a person's goals and health and whether or not they're even happy, because sexuality is a huge part of our happiness and enjoyment in life. Pleasure is very important in all of these different ways.
Yep.
So yes to that. And I wish more people could talk about that. That is a huge aspect that we are shamed for, and it shouldn't be shameful.
No, it's like, cool. Why do you want to build a stronger glutes, as you say, so I can be on my knees for longer? Like, it's like, well, imagine if we looked through gyms and health through the lens of how do you want to live your life? Or like, what do you do a lot of? Like, it might be for me that if they ask me the question rather than do you want to lose weight, it would be like, how do you want to live your life?
Yeah.
And if I want to live my life, well, I would just like to be able to go for a daily walk for an hour. If that's all my goal is, and then I want to feel energized throughout the day, then what I need to eat and how I need to exercise is completely different to someone who goes, I want to be a heli skier and I want to be able to jump out of planes and ski down the mountains. That's a really different goal set. So why are we giving the same plan to the same person? It's assuming that that person needs to be a certain weight for that. If you want to be a featherweight boxer, you're probably going to have to be small. If you want to be a race car driver, you are going to have to be small. That's the reality of those sports. But if I want to read novels, I don't really particularly need a small body to do that,
Exactly. Yeah, I was actually just having a very similar conversation with my mother-in-law about this yesterday. I don't even remember how it came up, but we were on the topic of exercise and how, one thing that I really do in my practice is making sure that we are looking for joyful movement, not movement to change the body. We want to do this for the body, not to the body.
Nice.
And for me, that's going to look a lot different because I struggle with chronic pain. And so every fitness professional I have ever worked with always said, you need to work out X amount of time, this many days, you need to aim for 6 days a week. Okay, well, I have chronic pain.
Yeah.
And strength training is going to inflame my muscles. So that can really only be incorporated maybe twice a week.
Yeah.
And that's on a good week.
Yeah.
So this needs to look different for me. I am not going to enjoy moving my body if I'm constantly in pain and trying to push through that pain.
And you can't move your body if you're constantly in pain and trying to push through it.
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. And so what it becomes is, well, first of all, there's no expectations. If I can only move for 5-10 minutes a day, okay, great. I moved 5-10 minutes a day. If I can, if I have the ability to push myself a little bit further that day, and I do like a full strength training session of yoga for 30 minutes, and I don't hurt by the end, that is a huge celebration because that means I took good care of my body that week and I was able to go a lot longer than usual.
Yep.
So when I'm working with clients, for instance, it's what kind of movement do you actually enjoy? Do you really like jumping on that treadmill and running for an hour and feeling like crap afterwards? The answer is usually no. And so, okay, what do you enjoy? And what I'm getting is a lot of people love swimming.
Yes.
Okay, well, swimming is actually, not only is it cardio, but it's also strength because there's that resistance training and there's stretching involved as well. So you are stretching your muscles, getting the blood flow going.
And very meditative as well. Like there's a mental health capacity of like having to learn your time, your breathing and stuff. There's a,
Yeah, exactly. Can the goal be to just feel good in your body? And what does that look like for you? What do you actually enjoy doing?
And the industry does not support that. in my experience. It even was when I was doing lots of strength and conditioning training. I realized I was like, I'm really strong, which means that I can be stronger in the gym. There wasn't anything in my life practically, apart from maybe being able to not take two trips with the groceries from the car, apart from the fact that I could carry them all at the same time. There wasn't really anything in my everyday life that I was benefiting from. I was only training to do harder things at the gym, which was cool if you enjoyed that, if that was a win. But for me, I'm like, I want it to be something that adds to my everyday life. I want it to be able to feel something like like I was flogging myself, and it was in my transition from eating disordered eating into disordered training, if that makes sense. I think that you'd probably think that
oh yeah, I have definitely been there.
that transition of like, oh, well, no, I'm just going to eat healthily and exercise really hard constantly and push myself. And, it was 6 days a week. It was 10 hours a week training was not enough kind of vibe.
Yeah. Well, and when we're in that experience of we're going to eat all of these super clean foods and this is the healthy thing to do. Well, okay, first of all, that's actually not enough calories for how much we're pushing ourselves at the gym. And so in turn, not only are we physically exhausted, but we're mentally exhausted as well, because we're not feeding our brains the way they need to be fed. And then our soulful nourishment is lacking. So we're just all sorts of exhausted. And that's not healthful. That's not true, genuine health.
It wasn't. And being I'm in a bigger body, people, and I talk about this. Sometimes on social media, I will have people say, but you're unhealthy. That's bad. You're unhealthy. And I would say, you looked at me 15 kilos ago, which however many pounds it is, I can't remember. But 15, 20 kilos ago, you would have looked at me and said I was healthy, but I wasn't. I just wasn't. I was pushing myself. I was exhausted. And I got to the point, I remember that Christmas came and my gym closed for the week over Christmas. And I just looked at my partner at the time when it came to reopen. It was January and it was time to go back. And I looked at my partner and I said, I'm remembering now the exhaustion. I was like, I just can't. I just wish I didn't have to go back.
Yeah.
I'm so tired. And he goes, you don't have to. And it blew my mind. I was like, I don't have to. And he's like, you don't have to. Like, if you're not enjoying it, then don't. And I was so exhausted that at the time, and actually still now, it must have been 3 or 4, probably 4 or 5 years ago now, adrenal fatigue. I don't know if you're familiar with that term, but like my adrenals burnt out to the point I had been so stressed and so highly strung and so disordered in my eating and exercise for so long that my body just, like, I couldn't even go for a 15-minute walk. And, you know that with chronic pain, with a chronic fatigue, and it still hits me now. If I push my body too hard, it just crashes and I now need to sleep for 12 hours a night and can exercise for only 10 minutes if I'm lucky. So, there's days when I push myself, and that was the result of that. Go so hard for so long. How is that possibly healthy?
Yeah. I think that's something that more of us have experience with than we would maybe care to admit. And a lot of us don't even have the language to put to that. A lot of us don't have the training or the education to be able to say, this is what happened. It's, well, I feel like, am I allowed to swear here?
Go for it.
I didn't want to slip a curse word and then all of a sudden be like, oh no, we can't do that.
You're welcome.
Cool. So I had a client come to me and she's like, I just feel like shit. And I can't wake up in the morning when I want to wake up. I can't do these things that I really love doing. And what it came down to is, well, first of all, we're living in middle of a pandemic. We are all tired. Mentally and emotionally, we are drained. And a lot is happening in the world. That's a lot to see your whole world go up in figurative and literal flames. It's hard.
It is.
So there's one factor that we really have to consider that's going to make the cortisol go up, and your body knows to heal in every way possible through sleep. So of course you don't want to get up in the morning, but on top of that, this particular individual was not eating enough. And she was really struggling to sleep. And so falling asleep was hard, but then waking up was even harder.
Yeah.
She wasn't eating enough throughout the day. She was pushing herself harder at work. I mean, of course, we are going to hit burnout.
Yeah.
Especially when we are really, really high on stress.
Mm-hmm.
And it's so funny because we don't always realize what stress actually is. We think that if we're not struggling in our relationships, if our friendships are doing well, if our family members are doing well, if we're not necessarily in a place of complaint with work, then we can't be stressed. Right.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, actually, we're all stressed right now. I don't think there's a single person in the world that is 100% right now. We're all struggling. So this is where deep compassion comes in. And let's look at what is going to nourish you spiritually. What does your soul want to do right now? Because until your emotions are cared for and your spirit is cared for, you're not going to be able to get back to the gym. You're not going to be able to start meal prepping the way you wanted to because you live a really busy life. That's not going to happen. We have to start from this box before we can get over to this box. Sometimes we have to break that big picture into smaller pieces.
And I love what you're saying there. It starts with the emotional and spiritual health. It's our mental, emotional, and spiritual body that we need to actually focus on first before our physical body. Because if we put our physical body first, where's it drawing the energy from? You know, and when I say energy, it's not just the physical energy. I was talking to my brother just this morning and a message from him. He's homeschooling his 2 kids. And, you know, we've now been in lockdown for, I think it's probably only been 6 or 7 weeks, but we haven't been able to leave our house for 6 or 7 weeks, apart from the 4 usual things that you're allowed to leave the house for. Our whole country's been in lockdown pretty much for a year and a half. It's pretty hectic over here, right? And I said the overwhelming thing is that I'm tired. Like I'm tired. Now I'm not necessarily doing much. It's not like I'm out socializing all the time or hitting hard yoga classes or anything. I'm just at home. But the overall thing is that I'm tired. And the realization there is that no matter where I go, I can't avoid what's happening in the world right now. It's the first time that many of us have ever experienced something that's happening on a world scale. You know, it might be that there's bushfires happening somewhere, or there's war happening somewhere, or there's something, but this is global. Everybody's experienced this. You can't go on social media. You can't turn the telly on. You can't even have a conversation like this. We're here to talk about body image, and self-esteem and self-love, yet it has to come in part of it because it is playing out. And irrelevant of where you stand on the matter, there is an element of like, it gets into our soul, it gets into our emotional state. We have to take into consideration the mental and emotional and spiritual stress that we all experience on a daily basis, let alone in a time of craziness that it is right now. It impacts us.
Yes. So many people just want to neglect their emotions because we're kind of taught that our emotions will just go away, but our body really holds on to every single one of them.
Sure do.
And you can't just slap an affirmation on it and expect yourself to be okay. Band-Aids don't work. And you can't really believe it if you haven't processed what you're feeling and thinking yet.
Yes.
So like we have to be able to process that.
I am peace, 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 I am peace. I'm getting fucking insane. I'm peaceful, I'm peaceful, I'm peaceful. Yes. That's called denial.
Exactly. I mean, even before I hopped on here, sharing a little bit of piece of myself for a second, I have a child with another person that I am not in a relationship with. And we share custody, and it can be very frustrating.
Bet it can.
My partner was so kind to go pick up my son from his dad and bring him home so that I could get ready and like center myself. And then he comes home and he hands me $40 and says, his mom wants school pictures. And also if they refer somebody, do they get a discount on tuition at Aiden's school? And I'm like, I can't deal with this right now. And immediately I could feel my skin just start to get really hot and my heart's pounding and I feel like I just want to scream. So I go into my safe space. I close the door. I turn on my meditative music and I'm sitting there trying to meditate. I'm like, I am peace. I am peace. And inside I'm just screaming. And I'm like, you know what? fuck this.
Yes. Scream it out.
So I am like, I'm breathing and internally screaming, but not externally screaming because I'm mindful of the fact that my child's going to want to know why I'm screaming.
Yeah.
And so I'm just like physically moving all of this anger out of my body. I'm like, I can't be holding on to this right now. And I pull out my oracle cards, of which is the divine feminine. I love working with the divine feminine. And I get Freya. And I'm like, yes, this makes sense.
Who is Freya, and what is it about her?
So I am not knowledgeable all about like Freya's background and who she is, but and I really didn't take the time to read her full description either.
No.
But I remember researching her when I was younger. She was one of the very first divine feminine beings that I had stumbled across in like elementary school. I think I was watching a show about witches and Freya had come up.
Awesome.
And so I became fascinated for a long time, was, hell bent on having a girl and naming her Freya. Well, that didn't happen. But she is essentially a goddess of strength and inner truth, and really being cautious of your boundaries. Saying yes only when it's a hell yes. And saying no when it's not. And really just holding true to who you are and remembering that you can't actually care for other people if you are not caring for yourself first. But you are a priority. And so in that moment when I am looking at this card and I'm reading the affirmation that comes with it, and I'm reading why my soul chose that card, it became very apparent to me that I'm actually giving my power away to somebody that doesn't deserve my power. And in that moment, I'm like, I can now release this. And we're going to be okay. But I had to take that time to be able to process it. Now, keep in mind, too, that like this isn't one of those, I was able to manage this in like 10, 15 minutes today. But when it comes to hard emotions triggered through trauma or pandemics or, whatever it may be, it's going to take longer to process that. The only reason I can do it this fast is because I have been working with my own support team for years to learn how to do it this fast.
And thank you for being so real with that as well. I think that there is that temptation of going, oh my God, I can just, sit down and scream in my head and read a card and it'll all be good. And yes, but only because you are that like that now. That's conditioning of your spirit, conditioning of your emotions and your mental health for so long. That's the reality. You've been practicing that. That's so anything that we practice, we get better at and we become faster at it. So that's why. And I think that, even with bigger emotions, typically what's happened is that we have a backlog. If you start to open the valve of an emotion, you have typically for people, and in my experience with my clients, 10, 15, 20, 40 years worth of backlog of emotions that people haven't been dealing with. So, I can see why people, and it was the same for myself. I was afraid to let the doors open because, oh my gosh, how am I ever going to process my whole life? But once you've once you've spent a few years, and it probably can take that time of working with therapists and stuff, it's like you can almost come back to a sort of a 0 point when maybe you're just processing the emotions from the last week. They might be triggered from your childhood of not being enough, of people pleasing. That's why you're giving away your power now. But it's almost like a cleaner slate. So now you're just dealing with the emotion that's in front of you rather than the 1,200 emotions waiting for you to go, I want to be heard. I want space. I want airtime.
What's coming up for me right now too is, a lot of us aren't taught how to deal with the hard emotions. And I work really hard with my child because I want him to have it easier. And he's also in therapy because he's my first child and I don't know how to be a parent all the time. So I know there's going to be something there. So I'm like, okay, you know what? We're just going to nip this right now and take care of it as we go along. But like bottom line is if you haven't been taught how to deal with your big emotions, it's going to feel like a floodgate the first time you do it. It's just going to lift it and it's going to lift and it's going to all come crashing down. And I remember the first time I did it, I felt absolutely just crippled.
Yeah.
I curl up in a fetal position and I cried for hours.
Yeah.
And then at the end of it, I was like, actually, I can do this.
Yes. Yeah.
I just needed to be able to feel it.
Yeah.
And through the last, I don't know, 2 decades, I've been able to get to this place where there's perceivably negative emotions, but I view every emotion as good.
Yeah, nice.
And the reason is because those perceivably negative emotions are going to hold a really powerful wisdom that I can learn from and grow from. And it's only going to make me, move forward into this future version of me that I most want to be. And so whatever that person is in the future, she is a mother. She is an embodiment of love. She is a divine being. And I can't be a divine being if I'm not holding the wisdom from the shitty parts of life.
Yes. Yes. That angle to look at it like that, I've often talked about, emotions are indicators. They're just communicating something with you. You need to know what they have to say. There's something going on there. They're communicating with you. And when you ignore, you're denying yourself your truth. And I love that lens of you cannot become the divine being that you are unless you you draw the wisdom from the shit, from the experiences of life. That's how we get experiences. I remember for myself, Kat, there was a many, many moons ago, before I went on any kind of personal development journey or spiritual development journey, I had this really poor relationship with failure. I thought that if I failed, I was a failure. And I very much personalized it and very much made it mean that I was not okay, that I was bad. And growing up in a household being that I wanted to be good, right? I wanted to be good. So I would never try things that I knew I would be bad at. So I never did anything new. I never experimented because, even when I was learning to play an instrument, I might hear, it was meant innocently, but the whole don't give up your day job. I don't know if you have that in America.
Yes, we do.
You have that same kind of saying, like we have coined it in Australia. It's called tall poppy syndrome. I don't know if you've heard of that.
I have not.
Yeah, so that's how pervasive it is in Australia. If someone grows too tall, like a poppy that goes higher than the rest of the poppies, you need to cut them down so they're the same size as everybody else.
Oh,
literally.
Yes.
So this is what happens in the Australian culture, that don't stand out, don't shine, don't get too big for your boots. I know that happens in America. Brene Brown's spoken about that. But there was a sense of, my dad would say to me, if I'm learning an instrument, he would say to me, well, there's the don't give up your day job, but, aren't you good at that yet? Or, oh gosh, you need to do it quietly, or you're making a lot of mistakes. And I'm like, at the time I didn't realize, I thought, oh yeah, well, I suck. That's why. And so I put the instrument away. I stopped doing the thing that I was bad at. And yet now, having done all the work that I have and learning, I've been learning the piano for the last 2 years or so. I'm learning Spanish. I learned how to roller skate to the point that I could play roller derby.
Oh, I love that.
I have failed so much. I've fallen over, and my coach used to say to me, if you're not falling over, you're not trying hard enough. And it blew my mind. And in my coach training, my life coach training, said that, to live the life of your dreams is not for the faint-hearted, and failure is how you succeed. And I had never come across this before. I never realized that in order to learn something new, you have to suck at it. Like you have to. Everybody who I look around me that I deemed to be successful sucked in the beginning. And it's the same with our emotions, right? When we first go into that, trying to learn how to deal with those emotions, like you in the fetal position for 3 hours going, oh my gosh, but that's only because you were new at it, Exactly.
I think that it's really common. I don't know about Australia, but in the US especially, it's like men are just so ready to go out into the world and prove themselves and do the things. And then women, it's so much harder.
Yeah.
Because we're taught to be quiet. Don't be too loud. Don't be too big. Don't take up space. And I'm reflecting on this too, because I'm working on putting together a talk.
Yeah.
So I'm like writing all of this out for the past week. And what really came to mind is in my experience, through all of my upbringing and all of the women that I had surrounded around me, it was always, don't speak your opinions.
Yep.
Don't speak your truth. Stop being so loud. You're supposed to be quiet.
Yes.
Just nod and smile. Be complacent. Right? And I'm just not a complacent being. I've never known how to be complacent. I can try, but then it feels like I'm dying. So I stop.
Yep.
Right. And so it becomes this really, it becomes an internal battle where it's like, okay, so we are born to be perfectionists.
Yep.
And I am going to be perfect at everything. And if I'm not, then I'm just not going to do that thing.
Yeah. Yep.
Well, here's the thing. Everything is a muscle.
Yeah.
And we have to learn it. And what I love about your topic with body image and self-love is the vast majority of us women, especially, we're not taught to love our bodies.
No.
We were taught to hate ourselves from the beginning.
Yeah, from the beginning.
Yeah, it is a muscle that is learned. And you have to train it, and you have to fail it in order to get to this place of, we're okay.
Yes.
Yeah, it takes practice. It takes practice.
Just in the same way, and I love that you've highlighted that. We have practiced being small. We've practiced being quiet. We've practiced holding ourselves back. You are naturally not a quiet, reserved individual, yet you were taught your whole life to be that way. And similarly, you know, I'm noticing that even what's going on in the world now, I'm very naturally non-compliant. But as a child, I was always compliant. I always I wanted to be a good girl, and because that was what was valuable. If I was outspoken, if I was opinionated, then attention or love was taken away from me in the world. You know, it's like, shh, like, you know, be quiet, be small. You're a girl. Very specifically to being a woman. The men in my household were allowed to be big. They were allowed to be loud. They were allowed to have opinions. They were allowed to fart and burp and sit there in a pair of trousers with their legs open. I was not. You know, the double standards. I grew up with 4 older brothers in my household. So, and I was the only girl. So the double standards in my house were so evident to me. There were rules for them, and there were a very different set of rules for me and my mother. Very, very different set. You know, even that, and that comes to it. My eldest brother used to tell me to shut my legs when I was 8. If I was sitting there with my legs open with a pair of pants on, like I was wearing jeans, and I'm 8, and he would tell me to shut my legs. You don't want to be a whore. I'm like, I'm a child. I haven't even, I'm not even, where is your head at? That is somehow, but my brother didn't have to shut his legs, but I had to shut my legs. And you know, even if he was wearing very short football shorts with no underwear on and I could see his junk hanging out, he didn't have to shut his legs. He didn't have to shut his, but I certainly had to shut mine. And it never... Even I'll tell you a story. I did maybe 4 or 5 years ago, I did a Vipassana. I don't know if you're familiar with that, the 10-day silent meditation retreat.
Yeah, I have heard about it.
So I did that quite a few years ago now, and I was in a deep meditation. As you do, you meditate for about 8 or 9 hours a day. And so there I am in deep meditation, and we were all told that you have to be, I presume all of us were told this prior to coming, but you couldn't wear anything that was too revealing. You couldn't have your shoulders out. You had to cover your shoulders because it's distracting. That's what we were told, that you couldn't wear skirts or shorts. You had to wear longer pants because it was considered distracting. As I said, I don't know if the men got the same narrative, like the same information, but I certainly received it. That I had to have things. I couldn't, you know, I had to dress demurely, I suppose would be the thing. Anyhow, one day in meditation, I'm deep in meditation. I'm in such a good zone. I'm doing amazing stuff, but I happen to be sitting open-legged. So I'm on the floor and I'm kind of like in a frog position. So my legs are up and out and I was wide. And all of a sudden there's a tap on my shoulder and I'm like, and I kind of like come out of the meditation very quickly. And I was like, what? Like, what's happened? Like I was genuinely concerned. And the facilitator, a female facilitator, told me to close my legs. And it's silent, right? We're meant to be silent, so we don't talk. Yeah. You don't talk, and everyone else is meditating. I'm in a room full of another 50 people meditating, and I was just stunned. I just came out of a meditation suddenly and got told to close my legs because the guru at the front of the room, had my legs open to them. I was infuriated, Kat. I cannot tell you how mad I was. I was just like, I'm here to meditate. What? And like I was wearing pants, like full pants. I just happened to have my legs open, and I was literally interrupted out of my meditation to be told to close my legs. And
oh my gosh, that makes me so angry for you. And this is also because, I've been through so much deconstruction over the way I have taken responsibility as somebody in a female body for the outside's perceptions of me. Oh. And for the longest time, I felt so ashamed for being the mom with a crop top and ripped up jeans.
Yeah.
And I was talking to my partner about this, and he had looked at me and he's like, well, why is this such a big deal for you? I'm like, because I have already been shamed for being a teen mom for the past 8 years.
Yep.
And now I'm going to be shamed because I don't cover up my body the way I'm supposed to.
Yes, because you're a mother now. You have to have some kind of,
I'm supposed to be modest.
Modest.
And to make sure that my child doesn't see my body. Okay, well, first of all, I don't want my child ever growing up around body shame. So we're not doing that. No. And second of all, when it is 90 degrees out, I don't want to have everything covered. It's not comfortable. And if I'm not comfortable in my body, well, then the whole day is just going to be off. Right?
And I think that leads into also the desexualization of women. Like you can only be sexual when it's profitable in that sense. Like a mum shouldn't be sexy anymore. Like you're not allowed to have sex anymore. Now that you've become a mother, you become that role and you're no longer allowed to be sexual, sexy, or have sex.
Right. Which is just completely ridiculous.
Unless you're trying to have another baby, in which case that's okay, but you should only ever do it once.
Oh yeah. We don't talk about sex after we have children.
Pleasure.
No, not allowed. Right. And I think the thing that really gets me the most is women's breasts and nipples are sexualized every day. It has been for decades and years and centuries, blah, blah, blah. But they're not inherently sexual parts of the body. No. They actually serve a purpose. They are meant to nourish children, of whom we grow within us and then birth into the world. Yes. What is inherently sexual is a man's nipples.
As you were saying that, I was like, it landed. I was like, holy shit, men's nipples are inherently sexual.
Yes.
They
were there for sexual stimulation.
Correct. They don't serve a purpose other than like the same way that our clitoris is there. Nipples are men's clitorises, and they just get to be on their chest out in the world whenever the hell that they want.
Yep. Oh. Yep. It is the thing that makes me so angry. But will I just willingly walk out into the world without a top on? Well, no. But I have gotten to that place in life where I am the woman who walks out without a bra. Yeah. Because first of all, what bra is comfortable?
None. Yep.
Second of all, I am far more confident without the jabbing of a wire in my ribcage.
Nice.
Right. And so if I want to feel confident and comfortable in my body walking outside my home, and that oftentimes means that I'm not going to wear a fucking bra because why?
Yes. Because why?
That was created by men for women, not by women for women.
Yes. Yeah.
And I am not going to uphold that.
No. And that's the thing. I mean, I know people who feel much more comfortable in a bra. And I, for probably the last, I reckon, 2 years now, I only wear crop tops. So I only have, I have large breasts. So I often wear, and it's just a crop top. There's no underwires, there's no nothing. And what I notice is that the shape of my breasts, because I have teardrop boobs, means that they're lower and they've always sat lower. I don't have particularly, the porn perky kind of tits that are considered the
they're all
norm.
fake anyways.
This like perky uplifted, they've always been teardrops. So I've always thought that they were saggy because I was perceived, like I perceived as a child, like I got these boobs by the time I was 9. So that was hectic in and of itself, but I had this perception that they needed to be perky, and the fact that they weren't was a bad thing. So I've always worn bras to lift my boobs up, so they sit here rather than here. Like that's a big difference. If I was wearing a proper bra, they would be sitting up here right now, and I would have cleavage and stuff. But now I'm like, this is more comfier for me. There's no underwires. It's one shape. It goes over my head. And actually, if I'm going for a walk, I feel far more comfortable taking my top off. Now I've got what looks like a crop top, a sports bra underneath, rather than a lacy thing. Now, I like lacy things when I'm getting in the mood, and I might wear it for 25 minutes before it gets ripped off me. That's about the only time that I want to wear the lacy thing.
And I want to make it very clear too that it is 100% about comfort. And the majority of my girlfriends, they all have much larger chests than I do. I am a small human through and through. I really don't have much cleavage whatsoever, especially after nursing a child. The shape of my breasts have significantly changed. Yeah. And that in and of itself was a whole healing journey.
Yeah, it would have been.
But I can wear things a certain way that make me feel comfortable that maybe wouldn't make my best friend feel comfortable, because she is a large chested individual and she needs a little extra support so that she feels good in what she's wearing. And most often that's going to be a sports bra, because it doesn't require a wire to poke you in the ribs. Yes. and if I'm wearing a white shirt, I'll put on a black. Yeah, exactly. Like there's different levels of comfort. I think it's really important that we do make it very clear too that body diversity is more than just shape and size. Not every individual's breasts are going to be round and perky like they show in the movies. And in fact, I think teardrop shape is probably more common than we're led to believe.
Yes, thank you. Yes. Yeah, and that extends as well, I think, to vulvas. I think that there's this real, and I myself fell prey to this, that there's one type of vulva that you're meant to look like down there. Like there's just like, because of pornography, I think that, and because we don't show each other our bits, because we're uncomfortable, because we have such a fear of being naked, and it's such a shameful experience in the world, we don't see other bodies. In one of my talks I do at all female festivals, I effectively strip down to my knickers, just my underwear. So my boobs are out. If I'm allowed to, I tend to go full naked, and I walk through a crowd of 200 women naked.
Oh my gosh.
To invite everybody to stare at me. I'm like, I want you to look at the bits that you're never allowed to look at, or the only times you're allowed to look at is the before picture. I want you to look at this body. I want you to see the stretch marks, the wrinkles. I want you to see the curves, the shapes, the folds. I want you to see the hair. I want you to see the pimples. I want you to see the realness of a human body, and recognize yourself in that. Recognize that all we see when we see naked bodies typically are in the world, it's pornography. And they are... they're not real bodies most of the time. They are. Those people exist in those bodies, but they're not the regular kind of bodies, which means that it leads us to believe that tits are perky. It leads us to believe that vulvas are completely neat and all the lips are on the inside. Whereas for a lot of people, like, vulvas come in as many different shapes and sizes and amounts than what people are. Like, and having babies vaginally, your vulva and your whole experience of your vagina might change as well. So the more that we get to see, and that's why very often I was just sharing the other day, on my social medias, I don't filter myself. I never put a filter on my face. I often pose in very, quote, unflattering positions because I want people to see real bodies, because it's so damaging when we don't. I love that you're the mum in the crop top and the jeans. I love that your son will see your body, and hopefully the bodies of men around him, to understand that all penises are different. All bodies are different. There's diversity as diverse as each individual.
Yes to all of that. And also how empowering for you to give a large group of women an opportunity to say, this is a real woman,
a real person. This
is a real body. Because even in the movies and TV shows, when we see sex scenes, it's all, lighted and shown a very specific way. And those people generally undergo a very strict diet and exercise regimen in order to prepare for that scene to even be created in the first place.
Yes.
We're not shown real bodies on a regular basis, especially in a natural setting.
Yeah.
And because the thing is, are we inherently sexual beings? Yes. But we're also more than that.
Yeah.
We are so much more than that. Being naked is one of the most vulnerable things that you can do.
Yeah.
And so many women are scared to even get into the shower. Because they look down and they see something they think that shouldn't be there. Yeah. And I mean, I've had that experience too, especially after having a child. And that just flipped my whole world upside down.
We have two bodies on what I would consider opposite ends of the spectrum. Like I'm 5'10". How tall are you?
I'm 5 foot nothing.
So we're talking, we're almost a whole human. Even looking at us on the screen, we can tell that I'm bigger bodied and you're smaller bodied. Yet, I probably weigh 2 or 3 times more than you, right? And I want everybody listening at home, the mentality is the same. Just because we're in different bodies does not mean that the mentality changed, or that, for me, I had to do the same thing. I had to stop weighing myself. I had to get rid of that. And I think that that's really important for everybody at home. Get rid of your scales is one of the first things, and stop trying to fit into clothes that are too small for you. Get rid of them. Those
were the number one things that I needed to do before I could even think about doing anything else. And so my son is almost 8 years old. So this is like 3 years of deep, deep commitment. I discovered intuitive eating. I started following a very diverse profile account on my Instagram and my Facebook. Like, I started following people of all different shapes and sizes and backgrounds, and of course other coaches, and a lot of like intuitive eating therapists and a lot of dietitians that took the anti-diet approach, and then there are some influences in there as well that I really love and appreciate, because all of them helped me get to this place.
Beautiful.
But I wouldn't have been able to do that had I not had that wake-up call. And my biggest mission as a coach is to try to help women get there before that big wake-up call.
Yeah, nice.
Because I would never want my best friend, for instance, to not wake up until after she had a child who was exhibiting the same behavior. Because that for me led to a lot of guilt, a lot of shame that I had to learn to release. And the biggest piece of it is, I don't look into the mirror and say, I love my body. It's not like that. I don't love the way I look like 90% of the time. I do, however, appreciate my body as another human. That's what made all the difference, was seeing my body as not just an object, but a human, another person that needed love and respect and care and compassion. And that's what changed everything.
less about the aesthetics. Like, and I think that that's the thing. I share the same thing as well. You don't have to like what your body looks like in order to love it, because love is not, I like what it looks like. Like that's like when we think about love, when we love our children or we love our partners, we don't just love them because of what they look like. In fact, yes, we want attraction to a partner, but that's not why we fall in love with someone. That's not how that works. So in our
you
bodies,
love somebody for who they are as a person.
Correct.
And our bodies are naturally going to change. Are we always going to be physically attracted to our partners? Probably not, especially when we're older.
Yes, it's
like
right.
that's not going to be a thing.
No. But you're attracted to their heart and their soul, and you love who they are. And I think that's the thing, you know, my approach, I love that you're on the intuitive eating path. It's because it's so necessary. And, you know, for me, I teach people how to it's similar to you, that reprogram your brain so that you actually see your body differently. It's not an object that needs sculpting. It's the vessel to which you live your life in. It's the vessel that I say gives you life, not just in the terms of like a female body. For some females can produce children or might want to produce children, but like it gives you life. And it fights for us every single moment of every single day, even in the depths of your eating disorder, in the depths of mine, our bodies are still trying to keep us alive.
Yes,
like our bodies love us ridiculously, unconditionally. Our bodies love us, and most of the time we treat them like shit.
Something that my mentor taught me, Holly Toronto, she is my coach, my mentor, somebody that I have worked with for a little over a year now. But she's taught me that my body is my original life partner. And so how would you treat your life partner, right? You want respect, you want trust, you want communication, you want honesty, you want unconditional love. Those are qualities that I look for in a relationship. So why would I not apply them to my body if my body is my original life partner? She is the one that has been with me for my entire life.
And will be for the rest of it.
Exactly. And will be for the rest of it. So it makes sense that we have to give the respect. And we have to give the unconditional love. Would we place conditions upon our children? Hopefully not. I mean, that would never be my intent. I've experienced conditional love with family. I would never give that to my child. So why would I give that to my body?
Exactly. And we have to realize that we are in a relationship with ourselves, mentally, physically, emotionally, spiritually. We are in a relationship with ourselves, and no matter, and in fact, it's the most important relationship because it's the only one that does not ever falter. You know, you have family members that come and go. You'll have partners that come and go. Your children, they will grow and they will leave. You don't ever get to leave you. And you are with you 24/7. And I've often shared that I was in a long-term toxic, abusive relationship with myself.
Absolutely.
That's how that was. The abuse, you know, the mental and emotional abuse was hectic, but the physical abuse with the eating disorder, the restriction, the pushing myself, the cutting, the drinking alcohol, the fucking around, the drug taking, everything that I've done in my life was.
Oh my gosh, you are speaking my story.
I know. When I was reading yours, I was like, we are the same person. That like it was all, you know, there's a sense of I don't know the culture in America, but in Australia, drinking and getting wasted on the weekend is a rite of passage, you know. In your 20s,
and even like after work on the weekdays, you're supposed to wake up in the morning and do it all over again, and it's just so casual. And that's also how we deal with death and hard feelings and celebrations, and that's just like the default thing,
right?
And I actually don't drink anymore.
Neither.
I am sober. I am over 10 years sober from substance abuse, and I am nearly 2 years sober from alcohol.
Nice. Congratulations.
Thank you. Because that was another way I was abusing my body.
And I want to highlight that with everybody listening and watching as well, because it shows it to me, they're all just the symptoms of the same thing. For me, it was all like, it didn't matter what I was doing, what what numbing agent I chose. Be that sex, be that busyness, be that people pleasing, be that drugs, be that alcohol, be that food. It didn't matter what flavor it was all me running away from my feelings. It was running away from me and the pain that I felt inside of me. And when we can be brave enough and build the courage and work with a coach, work with a therapist, someone who can help hold our hand while we open those doors, we will heal the part of us that we're running away from. So then we don't need to take the drugs anymore. We don't need to do the online shopping. We don't need to spend days scrolling the internet because we have healed the part of us that we're trying to run away from. And
I face my demons so that I can be truly liberated.
And I cannot share with everybody enough that is the crux of this. That is ultimately the crux of it. We need to turn within, face the demons, and realize and give them love, right? I don't know about you, and we haven't had this discussion, but the darkest parts of us are the parts that need love more than any other part.
It's literally little pieces of ourselves from our past, through our childhood, our upbringing, that are crying for love. Every action is a call or a cry for love. Every single one. And so if you lash out at a loved one, for instance, something within you was triggered. That is an inner child piece that probably needs to be healed. That needs a little bit of love. I mean, do I love who I always was in the past? No, I was a terrible teenager. I was awful to myself and others because I didn't know how to love myself. And so how could I possibly love another person or allow that into my world? I had to learn how to give love to those darkest parts of my life and myself in order to be able to receive love.
And that's the thing here. That is that saying that, how can you love someone else if you don't love yourself? I think that we can, but we can't receive love because we don't know how to. We can't, if we don't know how to receive love, it's similar. If you don't know how to bring yourself into an orgasm, how the hell can you teach someone else how to? And they might get away, they might fluke it, and they might be able to do it because they've had lots of experience, or they get lucky, or, they just try so many things that eventually they figure it out. But you need to learn how to do it for yourself. And you're right. Face the demons and liberate yourself. We have the keys.
Yeah, exactly.
Kat,
and let's absolutely highlight there too that those demons deserve your love.
They do.
And they might be scary, but they need your love. And then you'll see they're actually not so bad.
Because the only reason why they're demons, it's the whole, like, when a kid starts acting out for attention. They're doing that because they want the attention, right? Like there's a sense of, there's a behavior that they're wanting to be seen, they're wanting to be heard. So often the parts of ourselves are yelling out. The demons in us are just the scared children who don't know how to ask for love inside of us.
Exactly. That's exactly it.
Kat, it has been such a pleasure talking to you. For those of you listening at home, Kat and I just got straight in and we just couldn't stop talking. You would have noticed by now as well. Asked for on the call for an hour and a half, and I'm sure that we could go on for forever more. And I just want to share with everybody that that Kat, what I love most about what you do is that it's lived experience. And that's the same with me. You have lived experience. It's not that you've read how to do this in a book. It's not that, and maybe with intuitive eating and skilled and stuff, of course you've gotten skilled and you've educated yourself and you have lived experience. You know what this is like. You know what it's like to experience all of those demons. And as a result of that, to me, I haven't had a session with you, but I know that you would be brilliant because when you have walked the shadow yourself, you're no longer afraid to walk the shadow with the client. You would sit there and you would hold your client's hand, knowing full well that no matter where you guys go in a session, you're going to be okay because you've done it for yourself. And
that's the thing too. I went through Oh geez, I think it was three full years of certification training, all the while like I am healing myself
Yes,
and
correct.
going into the darkest depths of the valleys that I could possibly imagine.
Mhm.
And that is why I do what I do. That
Yeah,
is why I do the work, because I want other women to feel just as free, if
yeah,
not more so,
yeah.
and give themselves the opportunity to really feel in a home within themselves.
Oh, don't we all want that? You know,
Yeah.
isn't that what we actually turned to dieting for? You know,
Mm-hmm.
we turn to these addictions, we turn to these numbing, we turn to these behaviors because what we're actually seeking is wholeness. And what we actually want to do is come home to ourselves. So the very thing that we want is actually through facing the pain within ourselves, and then we actually will
Yeah.
come home and we actually will have liberation.
Yeah, that's exactly
Oh,
it.
now, beautiful Kat, please, if you know, where do we find more about you? What where can people come to maybe work with you? Do you have
Mhm.
anything that you have that we can go to your website or somewhere? Where can people find more about you?
Yeah. So first of all, thank you again so much for having me
You're
here
so
in this
welcome. Thank
space
you.
with you. I would love to connect again because this was just such a wonderful
It really
conversation.
was, wasn't it? Let's do it
It
again.
was. But as far as where to find me outside of this episode, I do have a free like journaling guide to help you
Nice.
rewrite your body story that I would love to be able to offer. That's a great place to start, a wonderful support place to be. And then that kind of like leads into a Facebook group that is up and running. There's a community there. However, my relationship with social media has gotten quite complicated.
No doubt
Meaning,
with what was happening in the world
yeah,
right now, it's quite a can be quite a volatile place.
it is. And it really came down to I don't know what my relationship is going to be moving forward with social media because I feel more true to myself and quite frankly happier when I'm not online.
Yeah.
And so a lot of the work that I do is going to be through my own podcast,
Mhm.
which is Return of the Intuitive Woman. And I can send you a link if you don't have it, if
Please,
you would
yes.
like it.
Yes.
And that's
And do you
new.
have guests? Maybe that's how we jam again.
Yes. I was actually going to touch base with you too, because I
Awesome. I'd
loved
love
this
to.
conversation so much.
I would love to.
Yeah. Those are really the two places you can go right now.
Yeah.
I
I'll throw all the links in the
Yeah.
show notes. So for those of
Yeah.
you who want to
And
get
then
the
I'll
free guide,
supply my email too.
yeah,
So like
perfect.
if that's a really good way to connect with me right now since I am in this complicated relationship with the internet.
Yes. Yep.
I think the internet can be so useful and so powerful, but I am simply just in a place in my life where I don't feel happy when I'm spending all my time there.
I think that you wouldn't be the only person
Yeah.
experiencing that, particularly
Yeah.
in the world right now. I can't turn on my Facebook without there being just a barrage of, yeah,
Yes.
it's not
Yes.
always a great place to be. So
And
yeah,
the
I will
thing
pop all those
is,
in the show
like,
notes. Yeah, so the
yeah.
Rewrite Your Body Story is a guide to help women explore their own relationship with their bodies, where it started, where they are now, and where they would like to be. So I will pop the link
Yep.
for that in the show notes, as well as Kat's email. And yeah, you can find her and the podcast naturally as well. So I think that that's a beautiful way to connect, to be able to do
Yeah.
that. And yeah, you'll be able to find her by email if you'd like to do any sort of a group coaching or intuitive eating stuff. I would highly recommend, based on this conversation. Holy smokes, I think that there's so much wisdom that you have to offer. Thank
We
you.
had such a lovely conversation. I love connecting with people that I can vibe with right away. And this is absolutely what that was. So I look forward to being able to connect again and do this again.
Likewise, Kat, thank you so much for being here on the More Confident to Learn a Guide
Thank
podcast.
you.
Until next time, happy
Yes.
self-loving.
Bye.
Whew, wasn't that a conversation? Kat and I could have talked forever. Thank you so much to Kat Fox for being on the More Confidence with Luna Gaia podcast. I've been your host, Luna Gaia. And if you don't already know, exciting times are coming up. My debut book, Perfectly Imperfect, Your Complete Guide to Loving Yourself and Loving Your Body, is out October 1st. So check out the link in the show notes, in the bio, for your opportunity to be able to access the VIP group. The VIP group has early previews. You get to have little snippets of me in the book where you won't be able to find them anywhere else. They are exclusive to the VIP group. It's free to join, and there are offers and opportunities for you to be able to come to the launch party and potentially win some services with me. So win a program with me through joining the VIP group. I look forward to seeing you there sometime soon. And in the meantime, happy self-loving.